Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Uh, Good to have you here with us, Mr. Bhatia.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much.
The theme that we have today flows from a question: Have reforms benefited the industry? Very quickly, long before I was a journalist, about 13 years ago, Defense Expo, you'll remember, you showed us a massive gun. For the first time, an Indian company had come in, and there was a whole artillery gun. If the audience can imagine, it would have taken up this entire, and it was there in person, it just in the metal, the hole, the barrel, everything there. It took maybe 10 years after that to get an Indian design developed gun to win an order. So those 10 years, uh, reforms took place. How have they benefited the industry, and which one moved the needle the most in your opinion?
Thank you, Baswar. Important question. I can get down to the memory lane and probably get a little emotional, but that's not the intent. Firstly, you asked about the journey of reforms. I don't think 10, 12 years ago, Defense Secretary would have come for a event like this and answered so openly all the questions you asked. This itself has changed. Second part, if you take a look at what has happened, let me take you to the little bit of the journey which we went through. It was in 2010 when I joined Bharat Forge. I was working with Larsen and Toubro for last 8 years, since about 2002. And I was asked, can you make a gun? I think my first reaction was, well, I can make a gun because I knew all resources will be made available. I'm not sure I can sell it. From that position to where we are today is a total sea change. And quite a bit of role in this change has been brought about by reforms. So let me take you on a bit of that journey because it's quite emotionally linked with what we did. So it was 2012, we bought in 2010 we started, in 11 we bought a gun manufacturing plant from Switzerland, Rouag, and brought it to India. 11 commissioned it, then made a team of best engineers possible all over, and set it up and tasked them to make a gun. In 2012, we showed this gun in the Defense Expo, which was held in Pragati Maidan. Nobody believed us. Everybody thought this is one of those imported pieces which we have brought and put it together. But the real struggle started when we wanted to test this gun. Nobody would give us the testing ranges. When we went to the DGQA, and there is the change which has occurred, the first question was, who's the OEM? We said, we are the OEM. He said, what? You can't be the OEM. Get me an OEM certificate if you want to come for the testing. So this journey, this struggle went on for a long time. And it was in 2016-17, in one of the events where, God bless his soul, Mr. Manohar Panikar, who was the defense minister at that time, sitting in that meeting. It was a seminar in, I think, Vigyan Bhavan. And we brought up this point. Our chairman spoke to them and said that, take a look. I made a gun. I had to send it to United States to test it. And we actually did send it to US, to Rock Island Arsenal, to test the first prototype. And I think there were a lot of red faces in that hall. And thereafter, the journey started about allowing private industry to start testing their wares. Today, we are talking about setting up of testing ranges, the modern ranges, where equal participation by private and public sector. So it's a big journey. But this also answers many more questions. It was in 2019 that we got the DSC approval for it, 150 guns. And we are talking about spiral development. It's only in 2025 that we got the order to manufacture these guns for Indian Army. But before that, we had sold it to 2 more countries, which the orders have already been completed. So this does tell that our journey has been fabulous on this particular path, so-called the reforms. But then, well, you also heard Raksha Mantri say that this is the year of reforms. So obviously this is a work in progress. This is not actually finished. We need to continue to move this path actually to make the difference. I hope I have answered your question.
So it's been a journey for those 10 years.
Of course.
Because having to take the gun out, fire it in the US, bring it back to prove that it works, it must have been quite the journey to get it to actual orders. So, in fact, our colleague has written in our magazine in the debut edition that India builds the arsenal, others fire it first, because export orders came before the domestic order came for your gun. So we've had that reform process. As the secretary mentioned, there will be a reform manual for procurement of weapons and systems, which should maybe come out by December. Optimistically come out by December. But where do we stand today after those 10 years of reforms? Because as our defense production has gone up, and of course, the total number, the absolute number, the private sector's contribution to that has also gone up. But the percentage range has remained, 19 to 22, 23%. So how do you break out of that?
Okay, so if you ask about where we are, defense acquisition or building the defense capability in a nation is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a 100-meter run. In marathon, where we are probably crossed the halfway mark, but there's still a lot of distance to go. And when will we cross that distance? We talked about GRF reforms. We talked about many other things to happen. Coming down to the issue regarding the private sector and where do we stand? If you take my company, we were probably at less than 2 digits 12 years ago, and we have crossed 4 digits with big marks in the last 2 years as far as defense production is concerned. So there is a major change. But is that the potential? Potential of Indian industry is much bigger. In fact, this reminds me of what President Roosevelt once said, future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And he built an empire for the United States. He built, if you read that book, Freedom Forge, you will realize what all US did in those 5 years. Something like 235,000 fighter aircrafts were built by United States in 5 years' time. So potential, I don't think has a upside. There's a great potential in this country. India of 2025 is much stronger, both technically as well as manufacturing. So if United States could do this so many years ago, we can do that too. But like Defense Secretary was mentioning in the morning, he was talking about that it's not the budget constraints, it's also our ability to spend, which means we need to reform our acquisition process. We need to take care of how fast we do it. There is a technology cycle. If technology can evolve, a product can be developed, say, in 3 to 5 years, you cannot have an acquisition cycle which is longer than that. If the acquisition cycle is longer than the product development cycle, what you're going to be getting is the items which are not going to be the state of art. So it is exceedingly important that we cut down that acquisition cycle. Now, what is it meaning? It will have a dual impact. One is that industry's investments will become much faster because you're able to turn around your investments in a faster way. You're also able to plan. Secondary, what Defense Secretary mentioned, our ability to spend will be much more if your acquisition cycles are much shorter. So my point here is that this is a journey. It's not going to come to any place and any time. This is going to remain a work in progress for all the time because the future is going to change. Along with that, we'll need to keep changing. Let's keep moving on this journey. I think the destination will reach sometime.
So just to press you a little on that, when you say the acquisition timeline has to be crunched, the secretary mentioned the DAP 2020. For those who are uninitiated, that means the Defense Acquisition Procedure 2020, and it is indeed a very big manual. I have tried to read it from page 1 to the last, and it is difficult. But even in DAP 2020, the timeline that is mentioned, there's that diagram. It's not a bad timeline. It's just that slippages keep happening. So do you think just crunching the timeline is enough, or would you, as the industry, because you're not just Kalyani, you are also SIDM, so you talk on behalf of all the Indian private companies who are in defense. Do you think perhaps an enforcement mechanism is required to ensure that the timelines are adhered to?
So this question can be answered in 2 parts. We talked about policy reforms. I think policy reforms are mostly in place. But procedural reforms, operationalization of that policy is really the crux which goes behind the timelines. If you take a look at timeline which was there in DAP 2020, is 36 months. And I would tend to disagree. This audience seems to extremely well, I would say, aware of DAP. Everybody seemed to be asking questions which were quite pointed questions. So everybody would be knowing what DAP is. So the timelines there is about 36 months. The problem is that those 36 months are actually never met. What we are looking at is an average of 5 to 6 years if it is a good procurement, and maybe 7 to 8 years if it is little delayed. And there are times when 5 years down the line, the tender has just been withdrawn without giving much reasons to it. Now, this is the bad side. But is it only with us? Let me give you a figure. Let's not run down our country unnecessarily. The average time taken in United States of America lies between 8 and 11 years for complex systems. But that is not the model we need to follow. We need to take a look at the countries which can do it much faster. You have examples of South Korea, you have examples of Israel. They are able to do their acquisitions in a much faster time frame. So we need to find those models, take a look at them, learn from them, and implement. And the reason behind this lies because the technology is changing so fast. If you do not sharpen your or cut down these timelines, you will always be picking up equipment which is outdated. Imagine picking up communication equipment in today's scenario, which takes 7 years to acquire. You would have come down from 2G to 3G to 4G, 5G, maybe 7G, and totally different. And what you will be picking up is something which is outdated. So it is the necessity which should be driving this. I think a good timeline for technologies which are changing very quickly, maybe between 18 to 24 months at the most, and other projects maybe about 36 months at the outset. Nothing more than that.
So this brings us to something you mentioned here, technology, because that is what underpins every weapon system, every capability that you seek to acquire. We do see, when you observe what the Indian private industry in particular has been doing, suddenly there is an upsurge in technology. So your peers at L&T, in collaboration with DRDO, in a record time, they're able to build a light tank, which is now undergoing tests. ATAGS is an example. So something that Mr. Bhatia didn't mention, in those 10 years journey, I think there is 1 year where ATAGS set a world record in one of its tests. The artillery gun, how far did it fire? If you remember.
So let me answer that question because that is a single simple answer, half a line. It fired 48 kilometers. Normal guns, which are 155-52 caliber, with the ammunition, which is ERF-BB, normally fires around 40 to 41 kilometers. But this gun uses a bigger chamber. It can, for the people who are initiated into artillery guns, uses zone 7 bimodular charge system. And because it uses a larger charge system, it has a much bigger range. And it gives you great tactical advantage. In fact, some tacticians will tell you, or strategists will tell you, that your standoff distance increases, which means you cannot come under enemy's counter bombardment. You can sit and pound the enemy's targets, whereas the enemy can't respond back to your gun position.
So continuing on that vein, so technology is there. A lot needs to be developed. But what do you see coming down the barrel the next 5, 6, 7 years from the private industry in particular?
So before I talk about technology and what is coming our way, let me tell you a small little quote. I read it sometime and find it very interesting and like to mention that. It said that any good astronomer can tell where every star would be at 11:30 tonight. Unfortunately, he cannot say the same about his teenage daughter, in brackets, or son. So technology is like the teenager daughter or son. You can't tell in what direction it's going to go. In fact, very interestingly, if you go back and what was the statement of IBM president, in 1977, he said, no home needs a computer. And this is the most qualified man making that statement. So if you are going to follow thinking, looking back into the rear view mirror and thinking where the technology is going, I don't think we'll be ever able to get the perspective. So what do we do? And in fact, here I would like to say, we need to look at what some of the people have projected the direction of technology. So there are 3 things which stand out quite evidently in this path. The first one is technology will change faster than you can imagine. Second part is the future warfares will be based on technology. They were always were. They are today and in future too. And it will touch every facet of your life. And the third part which said was that the technology hitherto used to be developed in a military complex, used to find its way into the civilian domain, is now going to get developed in civilian domain and is going to be coming to the military domain. Now this is the general direction. So what do? We do not know what shape it is going to take, but these are the contours. India is a country, very large country. We have people who are brilliant, who have built the ecosystem in many countries around the world without mentioning that. Even today, if you look at global capability centers, India has GCC for every major OEM in the world. So Indian engineers have that capability. So what do you need to do? You need to spread out the technology development so that let there be a million startups. Why few thousand? If there are million startups in defense and aerospace, I'm sure all facets of future development will get addressed.
So coming to startups, it is a very dynamic area. There are a lot of entrepreneurs who are getting in, but the secretary was here with us, and there is a quote that he mentioned once that of all the drone startups that we have in this country, maybe 4 can make something which is up to a military standard. This is not to say that startups should not come up. What I'm trying to ask is both for startups and for the industry, like you said, there is technology, there is talent. So could you identify that one, perhaps that one, hurdle or something, whatever it is that's holding them back, that that perhaps the government or policymakers really need to do away with so that things can get going?
I'd say the government does not need to do away, government needs to do something. And let me tell you what they need to do. If you take a look at startup journey and any technological innovation done anywhere in the world, 80% are going to fail. Because how does technology get developed? A group of people have an idea, they try to put that idea into practice, and they come out with something which is either going to be a breakthrough technology or a transformative technology. Now, in startup ecosystem, if you take a look, there are about 4 stages, which are extremely important stages. The first stage is conceiving the idea. Second stage is putting funding and converting it to a prototype, which was mentioned in the morning. And then comes what we call the valley of death. He's got the funding for the idea. He's developed a prototype. He probably has met 80% of the requirements. For next 20%, neither has the money, nor he has the support to take him through because the funding is finished. And that is the valley of death, where 80% of them die. Now you need to find a way to negotiate these startups through this valley of death. And for that you need handhold. And that's where it comes that a concept may have been formulated, a prototype is ready. Now taking that prototype to next level, giving him not those basic 4 or 5 orders, but giving him a view so that either he can attract funding from the market or he can hang on to an anchor industry so that he can develop that particular technology into a product and take it into a technological product which gets assimilated, which is the 5th stage when its assimilation takes place with the armed forces. So right now what we are doing is we are seeing stage 1 and 2. We need to take them through stage 3 so that they can become 4 and 5. This is not to say that this startup ecosystem has really not taken off. There is a sentiment in the market, and Business Standard knows better than sentiments when you talk about stock exchange and stocks in the country. There is a sentiment today which is extremely positive. Even with 1.5 crore, which is what TIDEX initial grant is, and he has to make a parallel expenditure of 1.5 crores of his own, we started off with 3,000 startups. And if you roll back before 2018 or 19 when this scheme came, there was hardly not even 10 startups in India. Today there are 3,000 registered, 1,100 out of them have already got orders. But I would say that neither 1100 nor 3000 are sufficient for a country like India.
How many do we need?
Maybe 100,000. Why not?
100,000.
Just I'll give you a figure which I can share with you. Startup India has 1,57,000 startups which are registered with them. Out of them, 33,000 are in technology area. Out of them, 9,000 are towards defense and aerospace. Successful one, you can count on fingertips. So what we need is, we need many, many more. If you compare this figure with a country like, say, Israel, our figures will be much, much lower as per capita. So what we need is to ensure that we are able to create ecosystem where we can have large number of startups.
So when we talk about support, the government has also sought support. Recent comments from the defense minister, the secretary mentioned it, and it seems to be the buzzword. And companies like yours will have to play a role there. Surge capacity. That if we are pushed to it, we should be able to develop whatever we need in sufficient quantity. Are we there yet? Especially the private sector, is it there yet? Can it support this requirement of the country?
Let me give you two examples which may be slightly contrarian in themselves. If you take a look at that, 5 years ago, we were not even making a gun a month. Today, we are the largest manufacturer of artillery guns in the world. We make almost 6 to 8 every month, and we can scale it up to 10 to 12 per month. The other side would be that scalability is possible if we are sure as and when the orders would come in, which means if there is surety of timeline, you will be prepared to invest, because everything cannot be taken on one particular parameter and decided. I think private industry is prepared to invest, and the feeling would be that we are probably not invested enough so far. I tend to agree with that, but we are prepared to invest if there's a little clarity. If today we move on from NCNC to NCFC, which means no cost but full commitment, or full cost and no commitment, which is FCNC model, you'll find that people will start gearing up for this manufacturing well in time. We also need to tweak some of our procedures. Like today, Defense Secretary mentioned, we have an order for 8X guns. I'm prepared to start manufacturing them tomorrow, investing our money, but we cannot, because the contract says that you cannot start manufacturing before the contract has been inked. So some of these clauses, second clause is, there is a trial of a gun tower gun, which is the truck which needs to go for trials. It needs to pass some more tests. I can't manufacture guns because the tower has not been put through. So we need to tweak these things so that the investment cycles can start. I'm sure India has enough money. If the clarity and the timelines are known, we'll be prepared to invest much more.
So, Mr. Bhatia, as we come to a close to our session, as our editorial director and the secretary also pointed out, we had the DPM, the Defense Procurement Manual, come out, and there was a gift in it, if one can call it that, for the private industry, which was parity. So is this a Dil Mange More moment for you? Because there's another policy coming out, and there is a promise of parity there too, of the level playing field. You're confident that you'll get it?
So dil to bacha hai, it always mange more, but you have better information of DPM than we do. Actually, DPM has not yet been released. It is only the information which you are sharing and some people are sharing. As of yesterday, I had asked my team again to approach. They have only issued out a DIP statement saying that it has been approved. It has not yet been released in total. So it should get released in 3 to 4 days' time, wherein I'll be able to answer your question. But whatever we have heard from the Defense Secretary in the morning, all sound music to ear. Let's see what all comes out, and if there is a... But DPM is only a small part of acquisition. It is only the routine revenue procurements which have already been acquired. We'd like to see the shape of DAP when it comes out, and hopefully from it's not 600 with its an Excel is 1,000 pages. I hope this gets a little reduced to maybe about 100 odd pages so that you and me can assimilate it much better.
So basically, what Mr. Bhatia is telling us is that he will not count his chickens before time.
Before they are
He
hatched.
wants to see the fine print, the ink on paper, and see that things have worked out. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bhatia. It's been a pleasure.
Right.